Welcome to the show.
What show is that?
Welcome to the show.
I'm trying to connect now.
Unable to connect. If you have an internet connection, go fuck yourself, because it doesn't matter.
So Discipula, it's me again, Miles Crisp, with another episode of Divergent History. Okay, so
what does that salute mean, man? What does that mean?
Oh, it's hello, boys and girls in Latin.
It sounded like something American.
Well, that's because I probably didn't pronounce it right. It's salute is basically greetings in Latin.
Salute, yeah, something like that. Yes, salute.
Yeah, and then you have discipulae. I mean, discipulus. That's male student.
Discipulus.
Yeah, that's male student. Discipuli is the plural. Discipulus is the.
It's like disciple, yeah, like you have it in English.
Exactly. The word discipline comes from that as well. But anyways, then the second thing I say is discipuli, which is an AE ending. Discipula would be a female.
Lie. Okay.
Right.
I get it. Very interesting. Okay. So what are you going to talk to us about today?
Well, today I was going to, the first part here, I admit, is going to be a little droll, but I want to lay out the methodology that I use, methodology that I'm studying and have been studying off and on at community college and on my own for the past, 8 years. And before I do that, I have a question for you, Vosto.
Oh.
How the hell do I turn these stupid sounds off on Skype? They're driving me nuts.
What you do is you go to profile, change sounds, mute all sounds, and save.
Alright, good. Because that was driving me nuts. Alrighty. Where was I? Yeah, that's what I've been studying. Methodology. Methodology is, as the name implies, the method that you use. The methodology of somebody who builds biocidal nerve agents and stuff like that would be biochemistry, chemistry, biology, and other related disciplines. Well, for this stuff that I'm into, it doesn't really have a name. I guess it's technically prehistoric humanity. That's kind of what I'm into. Anthropology is one of the tools that you can use. Archaeology is another one. Linguistics is a third. And linguistics is the third. And archaeology is one of the simplest ones to explain. Basically, that's when you dig up stuff. It's the study of the past physically by either finding it in, somebody's house that's kept a relic or something from thousands of years ago, or by finding a site that's been buried over. In Europe, you guys probably are pretty familiar with. Have you seen a lot of first level doors that you have to actually go down 5 or 6 feet of steps in order to access in an older building?
Yes, yeah, many of them, and there are many pubs as well. They used to be places where they kept the wine, and they used to be their wine keeping places, and now they are used for mainly stores and pubs.
Not every house or building out there is an example, but if you see a building from the 15th or from the 1100s or the 12th, 13th, 14th century, a lot of times they were actually built on the level ground when they were made, and over the years it's built up in front of them. That's why you have to go down to it. But it happens so slowly that nobody really notices, because by the time it rises a foot or two, it's already been 3 or 4 generations. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's archaeology is essentially the study of stratigraphy. Stratigraphy is when you have layers of stuff. Any single man would probably be familiar with a big pile of clothes. Well, whatever's at the bottom of that pile, you wore the longest time ago, as opposed to the stuff that's on the top, right?
Yeah. Robo asks, when did history start?
Okay. Well, Robo was asking about when did history begin? Well, it depends on where you're asking, because history is literally the study of people writing down what happened. If they didn't have writing, they can't write down what happened, therefore you have no history. The period before people had writing is called prehistory. That's literally what prehistoric means, the time before people were writing. Now, in the Near East and around the Fertile Crescent and the Levant, in Egypt, they had writing by about 3,500 BC. So they've had history for about 5,500 years. And you go to Scotland, for example, the Celtic Ogham writing script, I think, dates back to about 1,000 BC at the most. I could be wrong about that. I'm just pulling that number out of my ass. I know it's sometime around there, plus or minus 1,000 years. And so then history in Scotland would only be 3,000 years old by that definition. Now, you could say something, you could refer to history another way and just say that it means anything that happened before now. And a lot of people do that. And if you're gonna go that route, that's when you'd have to go to what was one of the next things I've got three basic things I was going to talk about in this show. The methodology stuff. I've got an example of Southwestern Native American cultures that I think people will be interested in. And I also have a brief history of time, starting with the Big Bang. So, if you want me to stop the boring methodology stuff, I can move into that. It's up to you. What do you think, Vosta? You know the audience better than I do.
I think that I'm really interested in everything that you want to say, So it's good. It's good. You just lay out what you had in plan for today.
All right. Well, basically, you've got these four basic disciplines that I'm working with here. Archaeology, again, the study of things having been discarded and buried. That's why refuse piles are so valuable at archaeological sites, because the stuff people threw away just piles up. So the stuff at the bottom, assuming there wasn't an earthquake or people that were raiding it from another culture to gather resources or something, assuming it's undisturbed, whatever's at the bottom will be oldest. And that's incidentally one of the most fundamental laws of geology. It's called crap. It's not Unitarianism. It's whatever. I'll get back to that later. But the second thing, linguistics. Linguistics is it's well known that languages influence neighboring languages, and through the study of modern and documented languages, tendencies can be analyzed when you have one culture influencing another. An example of this would be any Creole language. Creole, by its definition, is a language where, for example, you take natives out of the west coast of Africa, have Europeans enslave them, and move them over to the Caribbean or to the Guianas in northern, on the Caribbean coast of the northern part of South America. There, they end up mixing with the language of whoever it was who took them over. You have French Creoles, you have English Creoles, you have Spanish and Portuguese Creoles, and even within those you have variations because it depends on what native language those Africans had before they were enslaved that ended up mixing with the other one. When you see language families around the world, and a language family is a concept you gotta get your head around. Indo-European is the language family that all of us are speaking, unless somebody knows somebody who's either, all the languages of Europe and the Middle East and most of India are Indo-European, with the exceptions of the Semitic languages of Arabic, Hebrew, the Ethiopian languages, and the Turkic languages are also a different language family. But when you have a language family, it tells you that you have a people that were at one point one group, one culture, one language, because when you have one culture, you have one language. If you have more languages, then you have different cultures. So if you have a language family that exists in little speckled bits, for example, Turkish, it's in Turkey, it's in Mongolia, it's in Siberia, it's in Persia, it's in Iraq, but in these little teeny pockets. What does that tell you?
Well, that tells me just like now there are Romanian communities in every country, you know. So they come with their culture, they bring their culture, they bring their shops, their habits, everything. So, you know, something like that.
Or we know the Indo-Europeans didn't start spreading around until about 3000 BC. And if the Turkic languages are in such a wide swath, it implies that their antiquity goes that there's a people before about 3000 BC that were ranging between Turkey and Siberia and northern China.
Yeah, that is also, yeah.
Right.
It is possible, yes.
So that's how linguistics can partially be used as another tool to figure out what was going on before you had writing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you see the languages, you see the roots of the languages, you study the impact on the new civilizations.
Now, there's an obvious question some people might be thinking right now. If you didn't have any writing, how the hell do you know what the languages were? That's a very, very good question. And the answer to that question is linguistic reconstruction. And this is where linguistics starts getting really, really iffy and really complicated. I'm just going to try to explain it in brief because I don't even really fully get it yet myself. You have semantic drift and vowel changes and word changes and contacts with other languages and things being dropped off and other things adding and natural changes that just sort of all languages do. All of that taken into consideration, if you they've reconstructed Indo-Europe what they call Proto-Indo-European. That is the original language from which all Indo-European languages are descended. And they do that by taking all the words of all the known Indo-European languages, both extant and extinct. Hittite is an Indo-European language that they have written evidence for, but those guys died out by about 1100 BC. Or 1200 BC, that era. But anyway, when you take all this together, and you take like the word for sheep, and if in 15 out of 30 of the languages it's this, and out of the rest of it's just like scattered variations, but you've got this theme, then they assume that must be based on whatever the Proto-Indo-European would have been. And through doing that, they've tried to reconstruct that language. And that's how we know about a language before it was written down.
So what do you think the Proto-Indo-Europeans could have spoken?
Well, they would have spoken Proto-Indo-European, but I can't give you any examples of it because I could post it or something, but I don't know how to pronounce any of that shit. I'm going to say it wrong. It's just going to sound like gobbledygook.
Now, do you think it would have sounded more like Turkish sounds or more like it
would have it would have sounded. If you could imagine a combination between Welsh and Sanskrit, that's it. Throw some ancient Greek in there.
Yes.
Like one thing I remember is I think the word for field in Latin is agra.
Yeah. Because
Well, anyway, that's where you get agriculture. But in Proto-Indo-European, when they traced, I don't remember what the word is. It starts with an A, and I think it has a G sound in it, or maybe an R sound. I don't remember. But it's actually the Proto-Indo-European word for flow.
Flow.
or excuse me, full. River is the word, the Proto-Indo-European word for river is flow, and the Proto-Indo-European word for field is full. Like, the basket is full. The word field means, is the word full.
I don't know, like, in my country, like, when you say agriculture, we have, like, cultura agraria, So more like a separate word.
Culture of agriculture, or culture of the field, agra.
Yeah, exactly, something like that.
Cultura agra, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, anyway, that's the second thing, linguistics. I'm not a linguist. I dabble in linguistics just to sort of have some semblance of an idea of what the hell they're talking about, because on the surface it just sounds crazy. And anybody, if you're thinking it just sounds like BS, I don't blame you. Now, moving on. Anthropology. There are two different. All right. First of all, anthropology, anthrope, is the Greek for human, and ology is the study of. Excuse me. So anthropology is basically the study of man, study of humans. Mm-hmm. Now you have physical anthropology. Obviously, that's the study of the bones. There's something called the thumb trick. If you take a pelvis bone from a grave or something, an archaeological site, and you see the inside of the bone, there's sort of like a crescent-shaped groove towards on either side of where the hip is on the inside. If you put your thumb in there and it can wiggle around, it's probably a female. If you put your thumb in there and it doesn't, it's a smaller pelvis and it's probably a male. That's the only thing I know about it. Anyways, physical anthropology is divided also between what you would study from Homo sapiens, modern man, and paleoanthropology, which is essentially the part of paleontology where you study the evolution of Homo sapiens and of hominids in general, from Australopithecus up through the Homo genus and Homo habilis, Homo erectus, etc., etc. I don't get into that.
I saw the oldest Neanderthal depiction yesterday. There was an article with someone where they said that they found the oldest Neanderthal and
how old do you remember how old it was?
Reconstructed it. I don't actually. I was more fascinated by the picture than the context, and then I just left the page. I said, So how many species of I don't know.
How many species of Homo have there been?
Yes.
Depends on which school of thought you want to go to. Some schools like to lump it into three. The first one is habilis, the second one is erectus, and the third one is us. But I don't.
Cool.
I don't.
What's your view on it?
Well, what I was getting, I used to. There's a period when in about from 2006 to 2008 when I was kind of really interested in this and thought, oh, maybe I'd like to go to college and study this. And I got into it and I realized they can't even decide whether or not Homo heidelbergensis is Homo erectus or Homo sapien. That's a big difference. That's a really, really, really big difference. It's like, oh, was it like a Neanderthal or was it like a fucking monkey? I mean, that's a exaggeration, of course, but I mean, and the other thing is Homo erectus lived 3 times longer than any of the other ones. That doesn't make sense. That just looks like lazy science to me, And I have a chart here that I can pull up for y'all really quickly because I halfway have my stuff in gear today. But it's you have let's see here. You have Homo habilis that lived for basically about 1 million years, from about 2.5 million years ago to about 1.5 million years ago. And right around the 2 million year ago mark, so like halfway between Homo habilis' existence and the fossil record, Homo erectus comes on the scene. And erectus lives all the way until just about, let's see here, about 250,000 years ago. Does anybody remember the Hobbit fossils being found on the island of Flores around about, I think it was like 2004, 2005, 2006?
The what?
They were calling them the Hobbit people because they're really, really, really
small.
short. Like, yeah. And if you look this up now, you're going to find that there was only one specimen found in this cave.
So he could have been just an anomaly.
Let me finish. Now, I've got this Scientific American special edition that came out in 2006. The editor for Scientific American, I'm going to give you her name right now because I like her stuff. Let's see here. Her name is Kate Wong. And anyway, the Indonesian government confiscated, it was 7 or 8 human remains, 7 or 8 people's worth of bones. Like, they had like that many different skulls and other related bones were confiscated from the archaeology team that was working in this cave. The reason it was confiscated is because they didn't know what these things were. If you look it up now, they're probably going to tell you it was Homo erectus.
Homo floresiensis, they tell you.
I like that one where they give it its own. They consider it its own thing, and they're also considering it Homo. When they were looking at it, they couldn't tell whether because the skull structure looks more like an Australopithecine, which comes even before Homo habilis. Austro is a genus, and the thing that comes after that is the species. I don't remember what Lucy was called, but it's Austro something. And when you have Homo floresiensis, they're calling it the genus Homo. And the reason they're saying that is because even though it looks like an Australopithecine, it has the tools of a human, of a Homo sapien, or at least a Neanderthal. And it was found with this toolkit that was in a lot of ways at the time. They're like, oh, this just has to be modern human. Look at this. This is they had like fish hooks and stuff like that. It was way too sophisticated. And anyway, the government confiscated these fossils, and then they took them to court, and it took a little while, and they gave them one back, and they said, where are all the other ones? There are no other ones. You only gave us one.
That's funny.
You know what they did to the cave?
What?
They bricked it up.
So they can study anything.
Nobody can go there again.
That's really ignorance, complete ignorance towards the study of something.
Because it was so radical to overturning what little of a paradigm they have right now. Mm-hmm. Now, I can give you my job is just to educate, just to give people. This is the paradigm. This is what they're saying. This is why they're saying it. Oh, yeah, there's also all this other stuff that says that's a lot of shit. Now, you take it that what you want. I still side with science and like to think of myself as more of a scientist, so I have to work with the paradigm. That's fine. I'll do that. And the reason I won't study this stuff is because this thing is just too bad to even work with. So
you don't even have all the facts to put together because they don't let you study them in the first place.
Yeah. So the other part of anthropology, that's physical anthropology. The other part of it is cultural anthropology, and that's probably what most people think of when they think of anthropologists. They go out into the Indonesian, or rather the Papua New Guinea mountains and hang out with those people where they have the penis gourds and cannibalism and all that good stuff. But not to make fun of their cannibalistic practices. They don't do it for fun. It's part of their funeral ritual, and it's disgusting. But it's something they do. Who are we to judge, right?
Another thing I have stumbled upon these days was someone from the scientific community who was saying that they can't even, come to an agreement as to how, the number of the speed of light. They kind of study it in separate parts of the world, and then this country said that study said that the speed is this, and the other country said that it's this. So they kind of mold everything together and they come to an agreement. So it's not really something correct.
If they're arguing about the exact speed of light, they're doing it in fractions that you'd need to know scientific notation to even explain. I don't think I don't think the knowledge of the speed of light is that contested of an issue.
Yeah, but the fact that they can't, they don't count, like, if it's science, it should be the same numbers all the time, right? Not differences,
light slows down when it goes. The speed of light in the vacuum of space is different than the speed of light in the atmosphere, than the speed of light going through glass, than the speed of light going through a diamond. Light goes through a diamond 40% the speed that it goes through a vacuum.
Yeah, but what bothers me, that when you go to school, they say this is the speed of light, and it's actually just something that they came to an agreement in the meeting. It's not something correct, fixed.
Or it's like pi, 3.14. I can't count pi out more than 3 digits, but it doesn't end.
There are too many.
Like for all we know, I'm not very good at math, and I'm assuming you're not either.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if the speed of light is like pi. It just doesn't end, and then the debate becomes, well, when do we start?
Pi is the same all the time. Pi is the same. It has the same numbers after that. After that comma.
Yeah. And the speed of light would still be the same if it was always in a vacuum, and then you'd have the relative proportion of the resistance factored into that speed, and it would come out.
Yeah, see, you know how to say this, like, okay, vacuum. So doesn't that mean that all the laboratories study the speed of light in the same conditions?
Well, I guess the issue would probably be that the vacuum in the laboratory is flawed.
It's not vacuum.
It's not a perfect vacuum. And that's probably why you're getting different results from different laboratories. And that's probably why they're fighting over it. That's what they do. But what they're fighting over are probably very, very, very minuscule differences.
Yeah, of course. Like,
you're not going to really be traveling at the speed of light or anywhere close to it anytime soon, so it doesn't really matter. Our Skype is still working. They're able to get the speed of light close enough to be able to bounce a signal off the satellite and back down to Earth again to the right location.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's not perfect. That's what I'm saying. It's not straight.
Well, of course it's not. It's made by humans.
Right, humans suck. Oh, humans suck. Okay, go. Well, they have good parts, which is why the aliens haven't destroyed us yet. I'm just.
Or the aliens passed us by and concluded there was no intelligent life on the planet and moved on.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, okay, bunch of animals, whatever. Moving on. Maybe they shot like a little nature documentary and then just sort of left.
Funny, really funny. Yes.
Hey, kids, this is what it looked like on our planet 15 billion years ago now, or 12 billion years ago. We were like them once.
With wars and pollution and businesses taking over.
Physically having to insert an organ into another in order to create life. I mean, look at what these people were doing.
Yeah. But it's fun, though. It's fun.
Yeah. So is eating, but when you think about it, it's really a very disgusting activity.
As you consume the energy of another life form.
Yeah, well, you kill something, cut it up, put a bunch of other stuff on it because it tastes good, and you know.
Yes, that is true. Okay, so what is next on your
wrap up this methodology section. All right.
Yes.
First was archaeology. Second was linguistics. Third was anthropology, and the last one is history, which, as we alluded to earlier, was can either be literally interpreted as the study of the written word. That's what historians study. That's what an historian would tell you. Excuse me. And otherwise, it could also be used. I mean, you could say the history of the universe back to the Big Bang, and you're still using the word correctly. Now, this is when we get into philology. Philology, according to Webster's, is the study of literature and of disciplines relevant to the literature or to language used as in literature. And the second definition, which is what I'm alluding to here, is linguistics, especially historical or comparative linguistics, the study of human speech, especially as the vehicle of literature, and as a field of study that sheds light on cultural history. Now, philology, a good example is just look at the Bible. Look at how the contestation you have between interpreting Revelation as being relevant to the time in which it was written, or an actual prophecy, which, by the way, is a misinterpretation of the definition of the word prophecy, because prophet is somebody that just hears the word of God and speaks it in the Jewish tradition. But anyways, that it actually foretells future events. That's a literary problem. That's not a spiritual problem. It's a political problem now, but basically it's a purely literary problem, and the study of this stuff is called philology. If anybody wants to really, really, really feel like a dumbass, I would recommend that they get The Shape of Ancient Thought by Thomas McEvilley, Comparative Studies in Greek and Indian Philosophies. It is 737 pages long, and
Whoa.
He is a master, fully fluent in ancient Latin, ancient Greek, ancient Sanskrit, ancient Persian, and compares the histories of everything from the breakup of Proto-Indo-European and the peoples between the Indus River Valley and of the Greek civilization, starting with the Minoans in the early Bronze Age.
That's fun.
One of these days, I might comment on that, but not yet.
The Bible of prehistory.
That man spent 50 years writing that book, or 48 or something like that. Anyway,
Incredible.
So that's my methodology. Now, after this, I was originally going to go over with the whole history of the universe and everything, but I think a better segue would be to start discussing an example of some of the things that I laid out here. An example of history, an example of cultural anthropology, an example of linguistics, an example of archaeology. Mm-hmm. And here we have from Lecture 17 of History 125 at Northern Virginia Community College, as created and taught by Dr. James McClellan. And he told me, actually, the names of the books that he used to cite this, and I have it in my notes, and I think I have one of them, and I don't have the others, but it doesn't matter because I haven't read any of them. So I can't give you the citations right now other than how I just did. I could assure you that he knows what the hell he's talking about, and I wrote this all down from the note. I recorded the lectures, so I just went back and listened to it again to get these details. Now, the Four Corners region of the United States is where we're talking here. We're talking the Southwest Desert, New Mexico, Arizona. The Four Corners, it's called that because you have square-shaped states. New Mexico, bottom right. Arizona, bottom left. Utah, top left. Colorado, top right. Four Corners come together in one area, and that's what we call it. We're not very creative. The Hohokam, Hohokam, were the people that lived in this area. They were an agricultural people, and even though it was a desert, there were rivers out there, the Salt River and the Gila River. You'd want to spell it Hila, and you'd think, oh, it's Spanish, it's Jila. No, it's Gila. Yeah, the Gila River pronounced Gila. How the hell they came up with that, I don't know. So starting around 300 BC up until 500 AD, you have their first documented period that we have through archaeology. And archaeologists tend to name periods where they'll see, like, oh, okay, people were more or less doing the same thing from here to here, then some shit happened, and then they started doing it this way. And then they'll call those, like, you know, the classical Mayan period, or in this case they call it the pioneer period. And the pioneer period was essentially when the roots of civilization and agriculture were beginning to come in to place. And how do they have agriculture in this desert region? A true desert is defined as having less than 10 inches of rain per year. Well, these rivers that they lived along, obviously, that's how they got the water, and they set up irrigation systems to grow corn or maize, beans, legumes, and squashes. That's sort of the holy trinity of New World, North American, and South American agriculture. You grow the stalks of corn separated, maybe in the desert they would separate it about 10 feet apart because there was so little water, the roots needed to be able to spread out a little more. But in other areas they grow it a little closer together. But the idea nonetheless is you grow the corn in a row, and then you let between these long rows grow the squash that if you guide it, it'll just run down the middle there. And the legume beans, they would grow like black beans, pinto beans, kidney beans, that sort of thing. Actually, I'm not sure about the kidney beans, but black beans and pinto beans I am sure of. And they would let those grow up the stalks of the corn. They would outlive the corn's growing season, and once the corn had been harvested and was dying, basically, the bean thing would use it as its structure. Sort of like you need to have like a lattice for something to grow up, like a vine or a thing like that. So anyway, pioneer period, 300 BC to 500 AD. Second period, what they call the colonial period. It's when they started expanding. It's from 500 AD to 875 AD. They improved their canals and vastly extended them. Some of them went up to 150 miles in length. And they also started building truncated mounds, which is sort of like the step pyramid style of pyramid you see in amongst the Maya and the Aztec and all the Teotihuacanos and that sort of thing around Mexico and Guatemala. They were building them out of earth, though. And they also had a contact through trade with the Teotihuacanos in the Valley of Mexico, by the way. Now, this suggests that they had some sort of centralized either political, religious, social system. We don't know what it was, but they had something, obviously, because some of these canals irrigate various different fields. It's not like you have one field with one canal coming to it and another field with one canal. These actually shared a common source of water, and if you have that going on, you can pretty well bet you've got some sort of system to make people get along, you know? So, then the third period is 875 to 1100 AD. Am I still on?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It's called the sedentary period. Now, this is when climate had been changing, and around the 9th century BC, 9th century AD is when the medieval warm period began. So basically, when stuff was getting nice and around Europe and Asia, it was getting really bad and dry in this part of the of North America, and because of this drought, they stopped their expansion. You don't see too many mounds being built, and and that sort of thing. Now then, the fourth period is usually called the Classic period, from 1100 to 1450. Now this is when the towns got a lot larger, and the area that they were growing stuff in increased dramatically. I guess the weather, changed in their favor. They had cube-sized houses called great houses. There were multiple stories tall. If anybody's a Star Trek dork, they kind of look like the Borg ships. Some of the archaeologists that have worked on looking at their canals have reckoned that just because of the lack of resources they had, that it would have been a comparable effort on their part to build those canals 150 miles long as it was for the Aztecs, for example, to build the Pyramid of the Moon and the Sun down in Mexico City. Another thing is these rivers that they have out west. In order to be called a river in the Southwest desert, all it has to do is have water in it year round. It's nothing like a river like I would think of living along the east coast of the United States. Some of them were maybe about 3 or 4 feet wide at their minimal. So in order to have a 150-mile long aqueduct, essentially, you'd have to have a perfect or very near perfect grade, because if you had a little dip or too much of a little rise along that length, there wouldn't be enough water flow to just overcome it.
Pressure, yes.
Right. So the skill involved in that, considering they didn't have any trees really to work with, it was complete Stone Age, Neolithic tools that they would have had, is very impressive.
So they managed to build over 100-mile-long aqueducts with stone and Neolithic tools?
Well, it wasn't built with stone. I called it an aqueduct because that's effectively what it is, but it's really more of a canal. It was a trench that they dug into the earth, but they kept the grade such that it could flow with water for 150 miles.
I did find the picture, like a more artistic view of it, I posted it in the chat room of the Hohokam people, which you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's who I'm talking about right now.
Yes, but I thought you went on through time evolution. So you're still on Hohokams.
This is the archaeological record of the Hohokam.
Mm-hmm.
Now later on, they're going to turn into the Pima and the Papago, and that's a little different. I'm gonna get into that. Getting back more to their technology and their craftsmanship, in this classic period, they end up with greater expressions of art. Their population also was rising. There was an etching technique that they had for imported seashells that they would get from this trade route from probably the Caribbean. And the seashells were too brittle to actually carve, so they used the acidic sap of the saguaro cactus. And this acid would eat into part of the shell and dissolve it. They had a sap that was from other desert plants that was resistant to acid, and they would do whatever design they wanted to do with this acid-resistant sap or resin and put that on there, and then dunk the thing in the saguaro sap that was acidic, and wait until they had dissolved enough of it off to produce the desired relief. Then they take it out, rinse it off, scrape off the resin, and have this ornamental design technique for which they invented. And apparently the Europeans didn't come up with a similar method of doing that until 500 years later.
Well, maybe they had they were more into, they had better conditions of living to, they didn't need great aqueducts because they already had rivers and stuff working.
They kept doing they kept this whole system going pretty much. They just kept building and building and building on it, so that by the time you get to this classical period, once the drought period had ended, they already had a lot of canals and stuff, and then they made more.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Now, the principal town or the archaeological site is called Snaketown. And as Dr. McClellan says, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to realize why the archaeologists decided to name it that. It was occupied for 1,200 years, continuous occupation. The occupation peaked around 1100 to 1400 AD. There's little evidence that they had warfare. There's little evidence that they had classes because of the way their houses were structured. Nobody had a bigger house than anybody else. In fact, they essentially lived in what we would call either condominiums, flats, or apartments. It was sort of like a large 2 or 3 story cube building that probably had anywhere from 5 to 20 families living in it. I don't know how densely it was populated. Probably not that dense, but 5 or 6 families per building.
Was it like a rule? It was disrespectful to make a bigger house, or what?
Oh, we don't know. They're all dead. We just know that they left. See, that's archaeology for you. All you have is what's there. It's kind of like a crime scene. It's like, oh, okay, there's 2 shell casings, and there's a bunch of brains on the wall, and like blood with this dragging going over into that dumpster. I'm willing to bet there's a body in that dumpster. That's kind of what we're doing. It's just happened a lot longer ago than that. So,
what other stuff did they do?
Well, the thing is, around 1100, you have the arrival of another culture, of another language family, and that language family is Athabascan. The Athabascans came over the Bering Strait long after the end of the Ice Age. They did this about 2000 BC, 4,000 years ago.
Yes.
And they moved over from Siberia into Alaska. There's Athabascan peoples today in Alaska, in central Canada. The Huron Indians that you might think are Iroquois, but they're not. They're Athabascan. They had a different language family from that of the Iroquois, even though they were very related with them and close to them around the Great
There are
Lakes.
native tribes there right now?
Yes, there are still
remains?
Iroquois. There are still Iroquois, and there are still here. I honestly don't know as much about the Canadian side of the story. I'm pretty sure there's still Huron around, but I might be wrong.
Remaining settlements.
No, they're not settlements.
Lost time.
They'd be living in houses right now, just like anybody else. No, I'm serious. That time ended long ago.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, not that long ago. In some areas, it was as recent as the 1930s. But anyway, Arizona and New Mexico didn't become states until like 1912. Or actually, this is going to bug me. Let me look this up real quick.
See,
It was either
Cosmic
1912 or
Debris
1920.
says, Cosmic Debris in the chat, if you look. It says that there still are in northern Ontario and Quebec.
I would think that they're still around.
Maybe he's talking about the blood, but not necessarily the culture.
Well, they how much culture they retain would certainly vary. I was right. Yeah, Arizona and New Mexico, 1912. Yeah, how much culture they retain varies. I mean, I've gone down. There's 2 Indian reservations in southeastern Virginia. On your way towards York, Virginia, and they live in houses just like we have now, and they're Baptists, but they still historically attempt to preserve as much as they can, but all they have are ceremonies, dances, some words. And I talked to a man who was in his late 80s when I went down there around 2007. His name is Chief Wahasanakak, or his name is Chief George Wahasanakak Costello.
George, they make him wear a Western name. Funny.
No, that was the name his father gave him. But they had been assimilated since 200 years before he was born. But my thing, the story from him was he was. I don't know if he was conscripted or if he signed up for World War II, but when they asked for his name, he said George W. Costello, and they said, no, this is the Army, son. We got to have your full name. What's your middle name? He said, Wahasanakak. W it is. Next.
That was funny.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm just saying the Athabascans are a language family that spread around and basically came in as sort of like a migratory / raiding and invading. Some of them did, not all of them did. The Huron were very settled and agricultural. But these are the Navajo. The Navajo are descended from these Athabascans that came into the southwest area. I got to point out that the Hopi are very much annoyed at this. Their reservation is completely surrounded by that of the Navajo, which is about 5 times larger than theirs. The Hopi have looked at them as foreign invaders since about 1100 AD. Between that and 1100, somebody's pounding on my door?
Yes.
Huh.
We can do a break if you want.
I think you're going to have to. Hang on a sec.
Very well.
Yeah, give me 5.
We have... Okay, be right back, guys. We're back on Divergent History with Miles Crisp. What up?
Alright, sorry about that. It was no big deal. Alrighty, so, just getting into the difference, you have the Athabascans that came in, or different people, different language family from the Hohokam. This is basically the leads up to the period when they reach their demise around the middle of the 1400s, beginning of the 1500s. Now, the biggest part of the drought was from about the year 700 to 1300. Now, the diseases, which I have to point out, traveled at a rate of 400 miles per year. I said to somebody the other night that they went at 100 miles per year. I was wrong. It's 400 miles per year through the trade routes. So in 1520, Hohokam population is estimated to have been about 61,000 people along the Salt and Gila rivers. By 1694, when the Spanish first came out there were about 2,000 to 3,000 people left. All right, so yeah, I mean, look at that, 61,000 down to 2,000 to 3,000.
Yes, I was busy fixing the technical difficulties, so I lost you, man.
All right. Well, everybody else would be paying. 1520, their population was about 60,000, and by 1694, it was 2,000.
Hohokam population? They got invaded or what?
They died off from the diseases. Like I said, the Spanish didn't even make it out there until the late 17th century.
So who brought the viruses?
The trade routes. They had trade with Mesoamerica, with the Caribbean coast and the Pacific coast, and the diseases spread through those trade routes at a rate of 400 miles per year.
That's inevitable.
Right. So pretty much any natives that were seen, other than the very first ones that the Spanish encountered, would have been the survivors of about 5 to 10% of what had previously been there, 100 years previous, or 200 or 300, depending on where you're talking about. So that's something you really have to bear in mind. I mean, about 90% of the native population was taken out before they even had direct contact with any Europeans.
Yeah. It's... Okay, so what distance are we talking here? Like, when did the Europeans came compared to when these guys just exterminated themselves with viruses?
Well, the Europeans came in to Mexico around the 1520s, and between 1520 and 1690, they were wiped out from the diseases. After that, the Spanish went up there, encountered the survivors, and
killed them.
Here I have an amusing story for you. Actually, they enslaved them. At least they tried to, and it didn't work. They ended up rebelling against them, and that's another story I'll have to get into later. Because there's various groups that rebelled at various times. But they pretty much kicked their asses, though, the Spanishes. Now, there's the site called Oribe. ORAIBI. It's a Hopi site, and it's one of the oldest continuously occupied sites in America. Not in all of the New World put together, but just of the lower 48 United States. It's one of the oldest continuously occupied native sites. And I have a story that Dr. McClellan told that's amusing enough. I'm going to repeat it. He went over there, I don't know, in the 70s or the 80s with his dad and his daughter. And they're driving around trying to, he wanted to see this site. He just got out of college, that kind of thing. Well, it was after, whatever. He's driving around, wants to see arriving. Gets over there, and there's the perimeter of the reservation and just this dirt road in the desert, and there's a sign. And the sign has this list of 50 or 60 different things, types of people that are not welcome. Everything from lawyers to doctors to judges, politicians, businessmen, representatives. At the very, very, skateboarders, it said. At the very end, it said, but if you must visit, an exception can be made by the village chief. And he thought, well, I have to go to the village in order to talk to the chief, so fuck it, I'm gonna go there. And his dad's like, yeah, I'm not doing any of that. So he and his daughter walk up the road, and they go up this hill because the village is on top of a mesa, and they go around, and there's just a bunch of feral dogs or people's dogs sort of following around them in a pack, barking incessantly, and they knock on the first house they come to, and nobody answers, and nobody every house they come to, they just pull the blinds shut and ignore them. Eventually, they end up knocking on the house of the chief, and he lets him in, and he says, he's a studying, he's an anthropologist. He just wanted to check it out and look at the site, and asks if he could have permission to be here, even though he already is. And she's like, all right, well, I want you to go look at the church. It's over there at the end of at the edge of the mesa, and come back and tell me what you think about it. And he goes over there, and the church is in ruins. And he comes back, and he asks him, well, what did you think of our church? And McClellan says, knowing that fewer than 1% of Hopi are Christians, that it's in the state that it should be. And then he is told the story of why that church is in a heap of rubble. And what it was when the Spanish came out there, they tried to enslave them and make them Catholics, and made them build this church on top of the mesa in their village. And when you build a very tall structure on top of what's already the largest thing out in a very flat desert, what do you think is going to happen when you get a thunderstorm?
It's going to crash.
So the day the bishop had come over from Mexico City to bless the church or whatever the Catholics do, they are all gathered around the thing, and apparently it had been a very pleasant sunny morning. By midday, a storm cloud came, a single lightning bolt came down, blew the whole thing up, and the Hopi said, we're never going anywhere near that stuff. And they haven't been Christianized ever since.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Really cool story. Like, what do you do when you want to conquer some people? You destroy their culture, right? You make them worship your own gods. And it's so cool that this event happened in this way, because, they didn't have to forcefully join their religion, because they got scared.
Mm-hmm. Now, after, like I said, there were only 2,000 or 3,000 of them left by about 1700. So when the Spanish came out there, the Spanish arrived in 1694. They were encountering the survivors of the 150 years of plague that they had experienced up to that point, and they called them the Pima, the Pimas, Pimas, and Pima is a funny word because Pima is the Pima people's language's word for I don't know. And they weren't very cooperative with the Spanish. So every time the Spanish would say something to them, they'd say, "I don't know." So they just constantly would say Pima to the Spanish, so the Spanish decided to call them Pima. There's a few of these, actually. The kangaroo, I've heard, is an Australian Aborigine language for "I don't know" or "I don't understand what you're saying," because the English would come over there and look at the native and say in English, "Oh, what do you call that animal right there? What are you saying? Kangaroo?" And, "Oh, kangaroo? Oh, okay, kangaroo. Yeah, that's what they call it." Yucatan, the Yucatan Peninsula, when I think it was either Columbus or one of the other Spaniards came over there and asked the natives what they called that land in Spanish, of course, and they didn't know Spanish, so the first thing that they said is, again, something to the effect of, "I don't understand what you're saying," and it came out Yucatan.
That's so funny.
Yeah. And
Yucatan.
anyway, the word that the Pimas called themselves was the Ogham. It's O''Ogham. And that is their language's word for "we the people." As I said last week, most native groups' words for themselves translate from their languages meaning something like human being, real person, that kind of thing. Cultural chauvinism. So you've got two basic groups of these Pimas. You've got the One Village people, also called the River people. They lived in larger villages, and or you could just call them the Pima. Their word for themselves was Akamal Ogam. It's Akimal, then Ogaham again. They were patrilineal, and they elected a leader by tradition, a single leader. The other thing about them is they ran their society where you had half the people in the village were called red ants, and the other half were called white ants. And 6 months out of the year, the red ants would be in charge of everything, and 6 months out of the year, the other half of the village would be in charge of everything.
What a funny game! It's like a social game here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it apparently worked for them. And then you have the Papago, or the desert people, also called the Two Village people. And their name for themselves was Tohono O'odham, Tohono, and O'odham again. And basically, they lived in the desert just south of where the Pima lived. There's about 17,000 of them existing today, and they had no permanent rivers in their area. The rivers that they would have had on their territory basically were only partial water throughout. I mean, only running partially throughout the year. So half of their food supply was supplied through hunting, and they had two different settlements, which is why they were called the Two Village people. In the summer, they would live in the desert floor, and during the winter months, they would go to the foothills of the mountains near there. I'm assuming because the game went up that way.
Yeah.
And basically, the interesting thing is in this area, desert, it gets less than 10 inches of rain a year. But when it does rain, you get these flash floods. And, when you drive out in these roads out west where, it looks like it hasn't rained in 1,000 years, and then you see a sign on the road that says, "Danger, flash flood." And you think it's a joke, But what happens is because there's so little vegetation and so much exposed rock, you could have a rainstorm in the mountains or the hills, and it doesn't absorb into the ground. It just rushes downhill.
Like a torrent.
Through these arroyos that are basically gullies. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. It's Spanish. But they're gullies or whatever that this water would end up cascading through whenever you had a little rain event. So the Papago figured out a way to go up into the hills, figure out the drainage, and make these dams to sort of coax the water to go down one as opposed to hundreds of these various little canyon riverbeds. And at the end of it, they would set up these made out of reeds. They would make little water stops so that they could sort of fan it out of once it came cascading out of this canyon into a field in the desert in little trenches that they had set up so that it could be irrigated and they could actually grow some food out there. Again, the maize, beans, and squash again.
Yes, maize. It's important to have maize. Mm-hmm. Beans also. I don't know. Like for example, right now I'm like these weeks I'm just gonna eat beans and vegetables. That's because I want it. I want to see if I can do it.
Even in India, they make fun of those guys for just farting all the time.
Yeah, that is true. There is a lot of farting involved. But I try to avoid social places in this time,
Mm-hmm. Now, there's also a third group. Now, all three of these, the Pima, the Papago, and this third group I'm about to mention, the Sand People, or the No Village People, were all basically cultures that arose after the Hohokam had that dying out. If you kill 95% of any culture's people, you're not going to have that culture anymore. It's dead. There's too many nuances. There's too many, all the people that painted are dead or whatever. There's going to be a lot of stuff that'll just be lost, especially if you have a pre-literate society. So ethnically, physically, genealogically, the Pima, the Papago, and the Sand People are all basically the descendants of these Hohokam.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also their fault, because they are the elders are the ones who should have taught people how to do the art, how to do all the meanings of the ceremonies.
What happens if everybody that survives is under the age of 16?
Well, that sucks.
I mean.
But I'm just trying to say, if you're keeping the information away from people and saying, "Oh, we are the elders, we just keep the information for us, and you will just do your part in the society," that's not the way, I think.
Well, either way, I mean, if you go down to 5% of the population surviving, you're not going to have the same culture.
Oh, yeah, they're absorbed. They get absorbed.
No,
the loyalty disappears.
It just goes away. But anyway, until just before the beginning, or about into like the 1910s, you had a third group that still existed. They're called the Sand People or No Village People because they were completely nomadic. And since they moved around across the Mexican-American border, and apparently the ranchers said they were interfering with the cattle industry, bounties were placed on them and they were hunted out and exterminated, essentially. And it was pretty much a U.S. policy in the 19th and 20th centuries. So that's what I have about the Southwest for today.
Yeah. Also, what's cool, I mean, not cool at all, but when the Europeans came, they sort of took bit by bit the forests and the places that they were using to hunt from, like the natives. I don't know. I'm speaking in general now. I'm not talking about that civilization that you were speaking about. I literally don't not know anything about the American continent, But I just played some games and seen some movies, and that's what I understand. It's that they took their lands slowly but surely.
Yeah, or in the case of the Plains Indians, they killed off the buffalo so that within 10 years, their entire lifestyle and system was rendered impossible.
Yeah. I just see the European invasion. I see it as an invasion, I see it as, they wanted freedom from the tyrannical European system, but they did a lot of evil stuff to achieve those goals of freedom. Sacrificed other lives.
You know how it works economically is when they came out here, the way the laws and the system and the culture was, if you weren't taking something that another European person or European-related person owned, it was free.
Yeah.
It was like just picking up wood in the forest. It was, totally free. So that's how they justified it, because had they not done that, had they, treated them the way they would have treated the French, which basically would have involved going to war and trying to take their shit. But maybe not. Maybe they would have had to negotiate. Then you would see separate countries within the continental United States right now that are various native, independent, sovereign, autonomous nations. The Navajo reservation's the size of West Virginia in land area.
Uh-huh.
It's a big reservation. Most of it's barren wasteland desert, of course, because what do you think kind of land they're going to give them, But there's some uranium on it.
Yeah. So these cultures, they had different laws, different systems, like the Navajo compared to the other ones.
All across, almost
Aztecs,
across
Mayans.
the board. Yeah, in any name a native group, and they would have had different ideas from others. They had a few common themes. In at least in North America, the Aztecs and the Maya definitely had an idea of property ownership, land ownership. But Indians around the plains, and especially like right when in the 1600s in New England, They had the idea where you'd have like property rights for a village, and you've had this village for a while, and that's your village. Okay, I get it. But when it comes to going out in the woods and hunting, you have areas where, okay, this is where we hunt, that's where you hunt, but you don't actually own the land. You're talking about the right to be able to utilize the land. And when the Europeans came over, and you hear they bought Manhattan for, a few beads or something like that, what they bought was the right to hunt on it. Mm-hmm. The natives didn't realize that they were actually going to take the whole island and build a city on it, because they hadn't seen that before.
Yes. It's like another dimension.
Right.
So they got scammed, basically, step by step.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Naive idiots. Well, what can you ask for them? They were used to peaceful days.
No, they weren't used to peace. They fought wars and stuff. They just fought over different things. A lot of their thing was the act of counting coup. You'd run up to somebody, take his hat, smack him in the face, and get back alive. By the way, you got to get back alive in order for it to count. That's the whole point. It's just, look at how brave I am. I did that. And if you have a group of people, and they're even before the diseases wiped out 90% of their population, they still didn't have a whole lot of densely populated areas. So you're not, if you have a village or so, let's say of 250 people, you might have 70 men of fighting age. If 30 of them are killed in a war, you're probably not going to be able to grow enough food and hunt enough food to survive the winter. You're not going to fight as exterminated. You're not going to have a European, or not even just European, just old world style warfare. You don't have the manpower for it. So yeah, you'd fight, and they'd beat each other up, and you might have one or two people die.
So you had controlled fights.
Well, no, they weren't so much controlled. They just the idea wasn't to kill all of the other guy. The idea was
to win,
to kick his ass, and you want him to survive so that he remembers that you kicked his ass.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool concept.
Yeah.
Today there is too many people, so exterminating a bunch will only show the others that they got bound. Basically, it's the new way of showing like your ass got kicked by killing your army.
Well, it's just a matter of resources. You have to have a lot of people in a given society in order to have warfare the way we think of it. Like with the ancient Greeks, that kind of stuff. You see the beginning. All right, you see the beginnings of agricultures in cities like Jericho. Jericho goes back about 13,000 years, and you've got other sites from 8 to 7,000 years ago, flourishing for thousands of years, and you don't see a lot of war. Why is that? Well, you see fighting, but the fighting you see is between walled-in city dwellers versus nomadic cattle herdsmen who occasionally come down from the mountains and raid the village so that they could steal some pots and maybe an axe, a few things like that they can't manufacture themselves, so they just kind of beat somebody up and take it. But that's different from a war where you have Athens squaring up against Sparta with 10,000 men in a line on each side coming at each other and hacking each other up with swords and shields made specifically for killing another human being. You can hunt with a bow and arrow. You can kill somebody with a bow and arrow. A sword, you can't really hunt with a sword.
Yeah.
So it's not until the population numbers started rising, and not only the numbers rising, but you had to get rid of this dynamic between the settled planters and the nomadic herdsmen, when that married together so that you had the beginning of what you think of as a modern farm, where you have, a chicken coop and goats and sheep and a cow that you milk, and, the barley and wheat and, lentils and stuff that
mass
you grow
production.
and fruit trees. No, not mass production. We haven't gotten anywhere close to mass production yet. No.
Okay. So one cow, 15 chickens.
It's just putting together of these things that had previously been separated, because the people that are going to raise and domesticate sheep and goats, they're not the same people that made wheat. They're not the same people that figured out how to make irrigation canals. What the hell you need to irrigate sheep for? You walk them to the water. You have the dogs that you also domesticated that help you round up those sheep to bring them down to the river.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So you have these two phases of life, of ways of living. When it came together, that's when you had a system where you could have 50,000 people in an ancient city, a true city, and they've got their own meat supply. None of them have to hunt. They've got their own food supply. None of them have to gather. They've got their own water supply. They've got wells, and they have irrigation from the rivers, so nobody has to go very far to get water. The only thing you really need at that point is firewood. And firewood you can get because you're either along a navigable river or you're against the Mediterranean, and you can have ships, also made of wood, transporting wood from lands abroad. There's been a cedar trade out of Lebanon for 5,000 years, at least.
5,000 years.
Some of the pyramids have cedars of Lebanon in them. They've carbon dated them to 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years ago. They've carbon dated them to dates older than. I'm not talking about the pyramid because I don't agree with the Egyptological dating of that. But just take where Tutankhamun was buried. Some of that has cedars of Lebanon, and they've carbon dated them to 3,000 or 4,000 years older than when they were used, because people would reuse the wood. It was so precious and rare in Egypt, and it's Egypt. The wood doesn't really rot. It's it's still perfectly good.
Well, unless you put it in water all the time.
Well, I mean, if they were going to, if they took it out of an old temple or something, that temple wouldn't have gotten terribly much rain on it. So, yeah, a lot of them date differently, and you see that also in the Southwest, the Anasazi. Oh, the one thing I didn't mention, Hohokam. I said the Pima or kind of like the survivors' descendants of the Hohokam. Well, Hohokam is a Pima word for those who vanished.
Those who vanished. From where?
From anywhere. They vanished. Like I said, there were people that had lived in the same area before them. They were loosely aware of them through their oral histories and mythologies, and they called them those who vanished. Because where the hell are they? I don't know. They vanished. They're all dead, and we're their great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren.
Yeah, with the virus thing, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the reason they succumb to these viruses is because when you domesticate sheep, cows, chickens, pigs.
Robo just corrected you on the sheep's thing on the chat room earlier.
Yeah, I misspoke. Give me a break. Although there is a way to use the word sheeps properly, and it's when you're talking about like different kinds of breeds of sheep.
Well, in my country, when you say plural of things, you usually add something at the end. There is no singular form.
That's that old oblaut that I was getting into.
Cool.
Yeah, but anyway,
Yes, I totally interrupted you from what you were saying, which I forgot what you were saying anyway. Do you remember what you were saying?
Well, I was telling you that what the Pima word meant. Damn it. That's something else I was going to say about that.
What did it mean?
Yeah. Well, we've got 30 minutes left. That's going to take.
What did Pima meant, dude?
I told you. It means I don't know.
Ah.
Yeah, because they didn't like the Spanish. And it's like, imagine if China invaded both the United States and Europe, so all the listening audience is all included in this hypothetical analogy. Yes. And the Chinese are coming around, and they're beating up your grandmother, and they're talking to you and yelling at you in Chinese, and you just decide to say fuck you.
Yeah, or fuck.
Because everything you ever say to them is just fuck you. And the Chinese don't know what the hell. Let's just assume they have never encountered English before. They have no idea what you're saying, and they're just like, "Man, these people say that a lot." Okay, well,
let's call them this.
Well, let's call them "fuck you." Yeah, that's the thing. Oh yeah, the fuck yous.
It's okay to pronounce, in Chinese, "fuck y'all" or something. It's one of those.
Exactly. Just like Yucatan is a different pronunciation from. I'm sure they would have pronounced it closer to Yucatan or something like that.
Yucatan. Yes.
So
yes. So it's the same. So Yucatan, what did it meant? It meant I don't understand, or what?
Yes.
Okay, I don't
understand. Pima means I don't know.
Okay.
Hohokam is the Pima word for those who
vanished. Right. Yeah, those who vanished. Well, very good history lesson. So you want to wrap it up, or? Do you want to continue with some stuff, or do you think you have finished, or what?
Oh, I was going to keep going. I was just saying that the next thing that took longer this time than I thought it was going to take.
Again? So
no. Last time I had the opposite problem. It didn't take as long as I thought it would take.
So now we're good. We're on time then. Okay.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, we're running late. I don't think I'm going to finish all of this.
Don't fast forward though, because this is very interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to, for the time being, I'm going to run through pretty generally the geologic history of just geologic time. Now, a lot of geologists call this deep time. You got to stop thinking in thousands of years ago. You got to stop thinking in BC or CE or BC or whatever the hell you want to call it. You need to think kind of like you think like kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes. Mm-hmm. You've got thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, and billions of years ago. So starting the beginning of time in the Big Bang is roughly like 3.7, 3.6, 3.8 billion years ago, and Earth coalesced in the early solar system by about 4.5 billion years ago. And this begins geology. And geology has classifications, just like you have, the animal kingdom and phylum and genus and order and blah 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 blah. Well, in geology, the biggest chunk that you've got is an eon, and an eon is in billions of years usually. The first eon is the Hadean eon, 4.5 to 4 billion years ago. After that, and that's when Earth was just molten. It hadn't really cooled yet. It was still plowing out the debris from the early solar system in our orbital path. It was the period of heavy bombardment, when you have every rock that we've ever found from that period that's managed to survive. When you look at it under a microscope, the crystals are shrunk, and they're actually squished. And that comes from massive impacts on the surface of the Earth. That they actually get crushed, and it changes their chemistry. Anyways,
like huge asteroids or just small ones?
Oh, all kinds. And it's during that period when they think some big ass thing hit the planet and
killed the dinosaurs.
Back up, Rovosto.
I don't know what kind of big stuff.
I'm talking about when in the first.
So were eons? Well, the Earth existed eons, or what? It did not exist.
Let me just start here. All right, you got the number 4.6 billion, right?
Right.
All right. Between 4.6 and 4.5 billion, something hit the planet about 1/3 the size of the planet and created the fucking moon.
The moon, yeah.
Yeah, ever since, the moon's been slowly driving away from us. The moon also has a nickel-iron core. That nickel-iron core was, when it separated, still molten. So as it solidified and cooled down from the magnetism, it was constantly facing the magnetic nickel-iron core of the Earth. That's why the moon rotates exactly one time every time it rotates the Earth one time. So the same face of the moon that you see is always the same face. The other one they call the dark side of the moon, which is stupid, because every time we have a new moon where it's all dark on this side, guess what? It's daytime on the other side.
Yes, that is true.
But anyways, so you have that happen, and that's the Hadean eon. It's about 500 million years long. Then, from 4 billion years ago to 2.5 billion years ago, you have the Archean eon, or Archean. I think it's Archean in pronunciation. It's Archean, like the river Archean.
Archean. I don't know.
Yeah. Whatever. Now, debate ranges right now. Debate ranges right now whether or not plate tectonics was actually functioning at the time, or if you had hotspot activity. That is upwelling of magma from the mantle coming up to the crust of the Earth to create cracks and stuff like that to move the stuff around and start forming the early crust of the Earth. The other theory is that you did actually have plate tectonics going on, in which case you would have had originally you would have had nothing but oceanic-style crust, which is made out of mafic rock that's high in iron and magnesium, as opposed to felsic rock, which is basically iron and silica. It's lighter and less dense than oceanic crustal rock. How do you get, if you only have crustal rock, oceanic crustal rock, how do you get from mafic rock felsic rock? Well, when one oceanic plate subducts under another oceanic plate, the one that subducts is wet. It has water infused with the rock. And when you have water added to it, it raises the temperature at which molecules melt and come together and crystals form. So you can experience higher pressures and temperatures and yet have since the boiling point has been raised, it's not yet boiling. So you can have materials like silica form in crystal structures that otherwise wouldn't be able to form. And then when you have the volcano of that stuff erupting up again, what comes out is continental crust of a felsic variety.
Mm-hmm. So what are
It
you...
took me 5 years to figure that one out, man.
Yeah, well, that's like
yeah,
cool knowledge. You should type it somewhere, and so I can regurgitate it. You know, because some of these words I don't really understand them at all. You know, like what's you are saying.
Well, that's getting it.
But it's okay.
I've switched now to geology.
What theory do you? What theory do you prefer? Do you prefer the second one or the first one?
I don't know. I don't know. If you Google a geologic map, you're going to see a whole bunch of different colors, and those colors are a color-coded map for whatever the bedrock is in a certain area. And I was standing in the lab at Nova in Alexandria in about 2007 or so, and I wanted to get a copy of that map, and I couldn't steal it, so I was just standing in the lab, and I was like, I had like a copy of a map of the United States that was blank, and I was just sort of like tracing in like more or less what I was seeing on the map so I could study it. And this guy came in, a man named Dr. Marks, and he was telling me if you go to the USGS website, you could order this and the companion booklet that comes with. This is a big map. It was like 5 feet by 4 feet. Big paper map. And it's like $10. Yeah, sure enough, it was. And I did that. But I was talking with him about it.
Digital format, yes?
No, you physically get a 5 foot by 4 foot paper map.
Ah, awesome.
In full color with a book that comes with it that's about 100 pages long, and I can't even read it because I don't know, geophysics, but and chemistry. But anyways, it explains to you in detail what everything on the map is showing you. Anyway, I was talking with him about it, and I was saying, okay, so this is where you had the island arcs.
Someone just posted the map. Cosmic Debris posted the big geologic map.
Yeah. There's all different kinds because there's so much stuff in it. They're usually omitting it unless you get one that's like from a very small location. Then it becomes more and more detailed, just like a topographical map. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we were looking at one of the United States, and or actually it was all of North America. And he was telling me, because when he said when he was my age, I was about 23 at this time. So when he was my age, plate tectonic theory was not yet being taught in college. It was just beginning to be accepted in the early 60s. That's how old this dude is. And I like that because that gives you a different insight in the study that you're not going to get from a damn 35-year-old professor. If the professor's younger than my dad, I have a hard time having respect for him or her. But anyway, and I would expect everybody else in the listening audience to think the same of me. I'm just a student. Anyway, I was talking to him about these. I was trying to figure out where the island arcs were, and based on the plutons and the granite intrusions and things like that I was looking at along the Potomac River around Prince William County, Virginia. And he said, well, this is where they're sticking out at the surface that we've identified. If I took a cross-section of this, you could have, and he pointed to a different rock layer in West Virginia. He said, if you go down and over because of the folding of this whole continent, you could find that same layer beneath the one you're just talking about right there being that island arc. And as far as we know, the geologic layers continue into the continental shelf, but we've never been able to analyze that. The only reason we know that the Chesapeake Bay was partially formed by a meteor impact is because they were exploring for oil I think it was in the 70s. And they did a few core samples going down, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 feet below the bottom of the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, and they identified a meteor impact from, I think, about 300,000 years ago. I mean, 300 million years ago.
I'm just looking at terrestrial gamma ray maps for some unknown reason. Instead, I typed in geologic map of United States, and I got terrestrial gamma ray exposure map.
If you do geologic map in a Google image search, it should come up.
Yeah, that's what I did. And all that come up are just low resolution maps, nothing really big that you can actually zoom in and see details. And it sucks. It sucks, and the only one that was cool was a terrestrial gamma ray exposure map. Right, so back to the show.
Yeah, back to this thing. All right, so you've got the Hadean Eon, that's 4.5 to 4 billion years ago. You have the Archean Eon, that's 4 billion to 2.5 billion years ago. And it's during that between 2.5 and 4 billion years ago, somewhere in that period, you have there's no free oxygen in the atmosphere. It's all being, what oxygen there was generated was being immediately turned into rust. It was being oxidized because of the iron that was in of the rocks. You have to have iron will rust in the environment that we know today because it's oxygenated. But in order to be oxygenated enough to have a surplus of oxygen, you have to outpace the amount of oxidation, because when you have rust, that rust is taking oxygen out of the atmosphere and turning it into that iron oxide. You know what I mean? So that's when you have these, they're called banded iron formations. Now you have an organism, a microorganism, a prokaryotic microorganism. That is, it didn't have a cell wall. It's before the eukaryotes came out. Eukaryotic life is not in the Archean as far as I am aware. And anyway, they're called stromatolites. Think green slime in a creek. But this green slime, when it dies, it calcifies into a rock. And you get these little banded layers because they keep growing and growing and growing on top of each other. There's still stromatolites today. One of the most ancient life forms you could still look at off the coast of Australia. Which coast? I don't remember. I think it's up north, around the tropics. But anyways, stromatolites. And stromatolites are also one of the earliest fossils that you can just look at with the naked eye and tell, okay, that's obviously something that was alive. And after about 2 billion years of these stromatolites, you got enough oxygen because they were a photosynthetic green. I want to call them algae, but algae is eukaryotic. It's a different life form, I think. Or that is biotic, bacteria, whatever. I'm really bad with biology, so if anybody knows what they're talking about, feel free to correct me. So that's the Archean Eon. Then you have the Proterozoic Eon. That is 2.5 to 500 million years ago. And during that period, you get, different life forms, and that's when pretty much you get right up to the point where you have has anybody heard of the Cambrian explosion, the Cambrian period when life just went apeshit, and we've never had as much diversity of flora and fauna at any time as we had during the Cambrian.
Right.
So you got 2.5 to 500 million years ago as a Proterozoic.
We've got someone who actually is good at biology, man, in the chat. He said
good.
Cyanobacteria. And
there you go.
Blue-green algae.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I wasn't sure how to use the term algae because I don't know what it means.
Cool. Blue-green algae. Or something.
Thank you.
Right. Anyway.
So you have the Proterozoic, and after that, this thing I posted on Facebook has an error on it because it omits the Phanerozoic Eon. That's the Eon that we live in today. It's from 542 million years ago, which is 500 million, roughly, until the present. We're in that eon right now. And eons are divided into eras. And the first era is the Paleozoic. The first era is the... Did I get it right the first time? Paleozoic. The second one is Mesozoic, and the one that we live in, the third one, is the Cenozoic. Those are eras. So it's eon, era, period. The period within the Cenozoic era that we live in right now is called the Quaternary, or Quaternary. And that's the older term. Now they want to call it the Neogene, but I don't like that one. I prefer to say Tertiary and Quaternary.
Neogene, it sounds like Matrix. Neo. Gee.
Well, it also makes the KT boundary really hard to explain to kids, because that's the Cretaceous-Tertiary boundary, and it's called KT because they spell Cretaceous. They spell Cretaceous in German. But when you have a P with Paleogene instead of Tertiary, it's just stupid. And guess how many epochs are in the Tertiary? Yeah, there's 3 of them. Guess how many epochs are in the Quaternary?
4.
Yeah, there's 4 of them. It makes sense.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yes.
And the thing that
you want to confuse people now.
Well, that's the next thing. After a period, you get epochs. So I know it's counterintuitive to the use of the word epoch, but epoch is actually one of the shortest periods of noted time you have in geology, and they're usually, you've got within the Tertiary period, you have you have the Paleocene, the Eocene, the Oligocene, the Miocene, the Pliocene, and then the Quaternary, you have the Pleistocene and the Holocene. And when I told you there were 3 and 4 in each of them respectively, that's because that was the way it was originally created, and they've since changed the numbers, and I don't feel like getting into that. But anyways, that takes us up to the present epoch that we're in right now, which is called the Holocene. The epoch that was before us was called the Pleistocene.
Just get that word epic all the time.
Yeah, and the Pleistocene goes from... It's not very old geologically. It's only 1.8 million years old. And it ended 10,000 years ago.
Right.
So
what makes these epochs so specific?
Different things in geology happen during them.
So what's happening now? What happened before?
Well, the Pleistocene was dominated by 4 major glacial cycles, that the last of which was the one that we usually call the last ice age. Mm-hmm. The reason they call it the last ice age is because 150 years before that there was another one, and then before that there was another one. There are 4 major ice ages, and I think the last 1.5 million years, more or less. And some of them lasted, 500,000 years. Some of them lasted 150,000 years. That's it.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything else other than these ice ages?
Well, that was pretty much the timeline I wanted to do, and now I've gotten up to about, we go up to 200,000 years ago with the earliest confirmed anatomically modern Homo sapiens. It's from, the date is 195,000 years ago. The site is called Amo Kibish in Ethiopia. And this is when we get into the debate between anatomically modern humans and behaviorally modern humans. I don't know if you want me to get into that right now. I can. I'd love to. It's a big topic of mine.
Yeah, we have 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, let's see here. Let's go to this. You ever seen The Simpsons, Fosto?
Yes. I've seen a few episodes, I think, yes. Good. Not much. It's a good comedy cartoon. That's all there's nothing else I know about it. I just seen a few episodes by mistake.
All right, I got something for you. I got this from a comedy thing I was watching on YouTube. It was from a BBC show with that that gay guy commentator. I can't remember his name, but anyways, apparently, in the 18th century in London, they used to think a cure for drowning was blowing smoke up your ass, and they actually had this little bellows device that had like a pipe attached to it, so you could light the tobacco and actually blow smoke up somebody's ass in case if they were drowning.
Yes.
They had these things placed
Seriously?
along the river Thames. Apparently, I guess to discourage people from drowning because
they would have to take smoke up their ass, of course.
Yeah,
To the reverse psychology or something. You've got funny things there in your lands.
Also got a theory that I proposed to my American history professor last semester, whose name is Dana Schoaf. And anyway, it was basically that the South in the United States, with the slavery and plantation economy and all of that, was basically functioning as a colony, as it had been functioning when it was a colony. Only instead, it was acting as a colony, supplying raw resources and materials to the North's industries. Why didn't the South have industries, you might ask? Well, you're not going to have slaves work in a mill because, for one, you're giving them sharp objects, and two, you're teaching them something. That's a very useful trade and skill to have, especially in the 1800s. Had they escaped and gone to a free state, they could have worked in one of those mills because the supply of trained men for that was so low at the time. So there was a double incentive not to industrialize. Now, when you sell a ton of cotton, get $100 for it, the people that buy the cotton are turning it into shirts because they've got textile factories. And then you buy the shirt back from them at 100 times the rate per pound. A ton of shirts is a lot more money than a ton of raw cotton.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
It's processed. It's something
Right.
processed.
So
Finished
fundamentally, the South would have collapsed, and basically did anyway, because they insisted on maintaining that slave-based agricultural style. Even if it hadn't been slave-based, if it was just free labor, you still would have needed the industry in order to make it competitive. Otherwise, they're just functioning essentially as a colony. And that's what they did. And I wrote on that on the final exam, and I don't know what happened, but I got an A on the exam, so I guess I got it right.
Yes, that. Well, it makes a lot of sense, and he saw that it makes sense, so yeah, why not?
Mm-hmm.
You
And the
are a
propaganda-
good exponent of the new. Yes.
The propaganda in the Civil War between the North and the South, there's two different propagandas. They're both wrong. The idea that it's all about states' rights, that's Southern propaganda. The idea that it's all about freeing the slaves, that's Northern propaganda. Both of these factors do play roles, but neither of them are major ones.
Right. I didn't hear.
It was economics and politics.
I am so paying attention, like sometimes, that I am actually not paying attention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've been on for so many hours, man. I don't know how y'all do this. I mean, it's a lot of work for me just to prepare for this, to be able to do 2 hours a week. But
Yeah.
at some point, like, I have a lot of dirty laundry to air about American history, and y'all are gonna have to bear with me on that.
Nah, it's fucking cool. I mean, I like the information that you bring, man. I think we should all.
Don't forget.
We should record this stuff,
Don't forget, you English. You burnt. The reason we have a White House is because you lit it on fire, and it's really hard to clean soot off a marble, so we had to fucking paint it. That's why it's the White House. It used to be made of a pink marble. It was called the President's Palace.
That was so gay.
Well, that's the kind of marble. It looked pretty, I guess. I don't know. I never saw it. The only building they didn't burn because a hurricane came and put out the fire was the post office.
Yes. You know what? I think we should actually record these series that we are doing and play them during the day. Put them like in random playlists and play them. Because
do whatever you want, guys. I mean, it's up to you. I think the shows have been getting better. This one I actually had, material and stuff, and I don't have the time to go into. Oh shoot! I'm sorry, man. That guy Phil. I wanted to address his topic from Facebook. He was asking me about the ice sheets.
3 minutes.
Yeah, that ain't happening. Well, I'll talk to him more about it, all right, so that I know what the devil he's talking about exactly, because I'm kind of confused.
Yeah, you need more specific.
Yeah, I think he was asking, like, because there's an ice-free corridor that opened up between Alaska and North America, in Northern America. Basically, like, think in Canada, the provinces of, like, Yukon, Northwest Territories, a little bit of BC and Alberta, and maybe some of Saskatchewan. There's like an ice-free corridor through there by about 12,000 years ago. And I think he was asking, could there have been corridors before that, or the ice shifted around differently? And I think what he was getting into is really the previous glacial periods, because there was an interglacial, I think, 80,000 years ago. The last ice age that we think of began, I think, within the past 100,000 years. It was a rather short-lived one. But I need to get into those dates. It's very confusing because there's different analyses, and I frankly, I'm going to have to finish reading Shock's new book. And he's got a comment on that where somebody wrote him an email saying he got the date of the Younger Dryas wrong, and Shock was saying, well, he was citing this guy's from the 90s, and I'm using this date, which takes into account this guy's study and 3 other people, and I mean, it's still hot coming off the presses, frontier. Nobody knows. Yeah,
it's like putting the update on your antivirus. Yes. With the updating the virus signature.
Kinda. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And people are all used to the old signatures, and they go like, "What? This is wrong here. Why is it this year and it's not this year?" Oh, well.
And that's why these paradigms take so long to change, because you have to digest all of this new data as it comes in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Is it easy for the old people to take it?
Well, they've got at least 100-year backlog of stuff to figure out. I mean, even if we just stopped digging stuff up right now, we'd spend the next 100 years just finishing the analysis on what we've already got sitting on shelves in museums.
Ah, crap.
I mean, that's how far backed up we are. Really, we need more people to get degrees that do not get them jobs that make money, but help further the understanding of shit that doesn't matter, like what it was like 3,000 years ago.
So that stuff doesn't pay.
Hell no. What are you going to do? You can write a book. You could do what I'm doing right now, which is being unemployed and wasting my time.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a Burger King job and work at some liquor stores here pretty soon, or I'm fucked. And or you could teach. But in order to teach, you got to get about $150,000 worth of debt and education so that you could make about $30,000 a year, which I had been making before with just a high school diploma. So, yeah, that's the world we live in.
All right. So let's bring it to an end here. Okay. This has been a really interesting show about the various native civilizations and the universe. We also talked about the universe. Although I think we should have gone with the universe first, and then that
was my original plan.
Because it makes sense, it's chronological.
I know, but I thought because of the methodology, my methodology doesn't really include that, so... But whatever, I need to shut up now. It's the top of the hour. So anybody has any questions, hit me up on Facebook. Ask me. I can make a show about it. I need to get back on that rabbit question from last week.
All right.
And, I'm probably not ever going to tell you the thing from Plato, the guy who came up with the idea. I thought it started with a P. That's from the first show. I haven't forgotten. So
Note it down. Yeah. Note it down, man.
Yep. So, thank you.
All right. This has been another glorious edition of Divergent History. Yeah. Divergent History. Miles crisp. Yeah.
Walete discipuli et discipuli. Thank you.
Cool.
Bye now.